All right, welcome back to the channel. I knew this day would come when I start getting pressed by boxing fans about Jaron Ennis now being the boogeyman at 147 and being able to beat Errol Spence, who is now a faded champion. Let's talk about that line of reasoning and what fans have been telling me in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. We've got a young, exciting fighter that is actually going to be back in the ring next month named Jaron Ennis out of Philadelphia. Terrific young fighter that people are now telling me is actually the new boogeyman in 147 that nobody wants to fight, including Errol Spence. And some have said now that Errol Spence Jr. has injured his eye, that Jaron Ennis is actually the best guy at 147. Let's talk about that. But before I do that, please make sure if you're not subscribed to the channel, to subscribe to the channel and like the video, share the video. It goes a long way towards growing it, and I would greatly appreciate it. Okay, man, I'm a huge Jaron Ennis fan, and I think that Jaron Ennis is one of the most talented fighters in boxing and probably the best young fighter in boxing. I'm super high on Jaron Ennis. I do believe in his last fight that he got a really good win against Sergey Lipinets. Before that, he beat Chris Van Heerden. Before that, he beat Abreu. And, you know, he continues to step up and completely dominate the fighters that he's fighting and looks like somebody that is completely, you know, unstoppable at 147 right now. I've heard people and trainers talk about, you know, Jaron Ennis and compare him to Terrence Crawford, calling him Terrence Crawford 2.0 because he can do pretty much everything that Terrence Crawford can do, except for he can do it. You know, he seems to be a little more natural with it, and he's also a bigger, stronger guy at that weight class. Also, he shows a little twist in his game of being able to fight on the inside, roll off punches on the inside, counter people off of roll, you know, on the inside. So just an all around terrific fighter, man. But, you know, when people say that right now that, you know, a guy like Jaron Ennis can beat somebody like Errol Spence Jr., I got to say, look, man, put a pause on it because you got to actually see him in there with a really rough, rugged fighter. Errol Spence Jr. is the type of fighter that, you know, that is a lot better than he's a lot better than he looks, because the style of fighting that he has is so intense that it eventually wears down on guys who may look a little bit sharper, who may look, you know, like they've got more tools in their toolbox, all of that, right? So like, it's, for example, you know, to draw an example of it, it's like you've got somebody could have all the weapons, you know, in the world, but if you got, you know, they can have a bunch of, you know, pistols, they can have, you know, all that, but if somebody's staring at you with a tank, two tanks, and they're rolling straight at you and those bullets are popping off, but you're under that pressure, you know, who knows what your weapons are going to do against that particular type of weapon, right? So the guy that has a tank has fewer weapons, but he's got a more powerful weapon. And I think that's the case with Errol Spence Jr. Whenever Errol Spence Jr. would probably, I mean, when he fights anybody pretty much, until he gets to the point where maybe he slows down a little bit, my money is on Errol Spence Jr. because Errol Spence Jr. can walk you. He's consistently walking you down and consistently putting pressure on you. So just because, you know, somebody looks flashy doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to do it, that they're going to be able to beat him. You can look back and see, like, for example, and I know this is a little bit of an anomaly, but the Sugar Ray Leonard Roberto Duran fight, man, that was something where you saw a guy that has more, who can do everything in the world in Sugar Ray Leonard, right? He can fight on the outside, he can fight on the inside, and he really can crack. Like, that's one of the things that very underestimated about Sugar Ray Leonard in his career, is that Sugar Ray Leonard can knock you out with either hand, and he proved that, you know, especially early during his career. He was just a terrific fighter, but he got in there against a guy that was a pressure fighter, that every second of the fight, every second of the fight, there's something coming back at you. You don't have as much time to think as you normally do, to pot shot and kind of figure your way out of it. And he wound up losing to Roberto Duran. Now, in the second fight, he figured it out and came back and beat Roberto Duran. But you get my point, and that is something that has happened throughout boxing, where the pressure fighter who doesn't necessarily look like he's a snazzy, snazzy and has all the weapons, really does wind up winning. And I think personally that that's what is going to happen with Errol Spence Jr. and Terrence Crawford. And as far as I can see right now, I think that would happen with Jaron Ennis and Errol Spence Jr. as well at this point in time in his career, because I just think that Jaron Ennis, despite the fact that he actually has 27, he's upwards of 27 fights, I still think that he may be a little bit green. But where I do agree with people is that Jaron Ennis is the new boogeyman in that division, and he's somebody that pretty much nobody wants to fight, because even though I say that I think Errol Spence Jr. will pull out the fight, I know that there's a full well a chance that he may not, just because, Jaron Ennis, there's occasions where guys look certain ways and they're actually better than what you thought that they were when they get to a peak. I think Errol Spence Jr. is one of those guys that is actually a better fighter. Like, he was coming up and I thought he was a good fighter, but once he got to the championship level, I was like, man, this guy is really better than I thought, because not just because of his ability to bowl over people, but also his ability to box on the outside when he needs to. I didn't really appreciate was there. So there's a chance that Jaron Ennis might have that kicker in him that could take him beyond Errol Spence Jr. for sure. But, I'm just not willing to go out there. However, to call him the boogeyman and to say that he is the guy that other people don't want to fight and are going to be looking to get away from, I absolutely agree with that. Keith Thurman is somebody that said that that he's not interested in fighting, or actually Keith Thurman faked like he didn't know who he was. And which is honestly, man, with Keith Thurman, that was really very, very corny, because Keith Thurman is a very bright guy. Keith Thurman knows what's going on around him. He's very, very observant, right? Sharp-minded guy. He's not going to miss a guy like Jaron Ennis coming up behind him, right? But Sean Porter said the same thing. When Sean Porter talked about Jaron Ennis, Sean Porter was like, look, I'm not fighting that young guy. I'm not fighting that young lion. The young lions are going to have to fight that young lion. I'm not doing that. He's like pretty much like, hey man, I ain't got nothing to prove like that with him. Now, if he winds up getting a belt and I got to fight him for a championship, then I'll fight him for a championship. But just willy-nilly fighting Jaron Ennis, he wasn't willing to do that. So now that's why I'm saying, yeah, Jaron Ennis probably is the boogeyman in that division. Terrence Crawford is probably not going to want to fight him, to not saying that these guys are ducking Jaron Ennis, because that's what, people will start saying, is that people are ducking Jaron Ennis. Until Jaron Ennis gets himself into a position where he's a mandatory or something like that, or he's really dominating him, I wouldn't say that they are ducking Jaron Ennis. But when they see him coming, I'm telling you, more than likely a lot of these guys are going to move. But is he the top welterweight right now? I can't say that he deserves the title of being the top welterweight right now, but I do think that he more than likely is the top young prospect in boxing. I put him ahead of the guys at 135 pounds, put him ahead of Edward Berlanga, guys like that, at 168, because, he has everything that, you need. And I'm looking forward to him in his career. It's just, I think, pump the brakes on Errol Spence Jr., especially when you refer to the fact that Errol Spence Jr.'s eye injury has now made him a little more fragile, or whatever the saying is, or whatever is being said. But, anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comments section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.